Welcome to No Pun Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. Our Look Inside series continues. We are knocking out all 32 teams, a special fantasy football preview episode for every team this summer. We have just crossed the halfway point. We just covered some pretty boring teams over the last couple of weeks, but there is nothing boring about the Cincinnati Bengals. Probably the most exciting offense in fantasy football. They have superstars at just about every level. There's a lot to talk about, but maybe we don't like these guys as much as other people do. Let's talk about it. Welcome into No Pun Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, as we gave Joe Zillow a few of these episodes off. But with me, as always, Josh Hudson. Josh, how are you today, buddy?
Oh, it's going to be a good one. You know how much I love talking about Jamar Chase.
I was going to say.
And we don't even talk about him much in this episode.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed with these Look Inside episodes is the superstars, the first round picks. We don't spend a ton of time on those guys. They're the first round picks. You either like them, you don't like them. More importantly, you either have the pick to draft them or you don't have the pick to draft them. We're not talking you in to taking Jamar Chase. And if we were going to talk about it, it'd be to talk you out of it. That ain't happening. If you are new to this series, we are covering every single NFL team from a fantasy football standpoint. I believe, Josh, this may be episode 17. I think we just crossed the halfway point with the Arizona Cardinals with the last episode we recorded. Again, no Joe Zolo this week. It's just going to be me and Josh talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Before we do so, if this is the first exciting offense we've really had a chance to talk about, maybe the Chicago Bears, but the Bengals are far more exciting. This is a team that you might want to get some action in when it comes to Underdog Sports. If you use promo code WOFF over at Underdog, if you've never used Underdog before, you can do best ball drafts. You can do pick'em games. They have a lot of really cool stuff available in a ton of states, and they will give you a deposit match and a free pick if you use our promo code. Reminder, that is a partnership we have with Women of Fantasy Football and Laura Oakman's Galvanize, where we like to send women in this industry to the Super Bowl, to the NFL draft, to the combine. We have been able to do that for, I believe, 3 years running now. And with contributions from folks like you. We have a great charity tournament going on right now, the Gods and Goddesses of Fantasy Football, where we're relying heavily on donations. But also, if you guys haven't already signed up for Underdog, go get yourself some free money and get us a little bit of money on the back end, because they're paying us to say this to you right now. If you sign up, they don't just pay us. We need you to sign up. So do that and bet on some Cincinnati Bengals, Josh, because this offense, there are no questions about this offense. Yeah.
We got some firepower.
Lots of questions about the defense, but no questions about the offense. Josh, 9-8 last year. I got to be honest. I was a little shocked. I mean, I remember that their defense was awful, but to do this episode right after the Carolina Panthers the Arizona Cardinals and right before the Seattle Seahawks, the Bengals don't feel like that's the company they belong in. Obviously, they brought everybody back. Everybody on offense. Zach Taylor is back, and it is Zach Taylor's offense. Josh, when we look at this starting lineup and looking at the Underdog promo, before I do so, folks, I would remind you, subscribe, do all the things that you're supposed to do for these great videos. We are putting out a ton of content for you this entire summer. You do not want to miss a video. Smash that subscribe button. We'd be very much appreciated. Hopefully, when you're watching this, we just crossed over 1,500 1,400 followers. You are going to be the one to get us to 1,500 as long as you hit that button. Josh, we always use Underdog ADP. Makes a ton of sense to do that right now, because that's the ones where there's actually skin in the game. These are the ADPs that matter because people have a few dollars in there versus just kind of like mock drafts and things like that. There will be a Cincinnati Bengals article on our website right now. We don't quite know who the player spotlight's going to be, but our good buddy Austin Amendolia is going to write an article about the Bengals. Josh, when we look at this team, QB1 is Joe Burrow. He's going off the board as the QB5 right now. I don't think anybody's really going to argue he's probably the best passing quarterback in the NFL. Doesn't quite give the rushing upside as some of these other guys, but certainly the best passing quarterback. The RB1 is Chase Brown. He's going off the board as RB11. Zach Moss is going to back up Chase Brown. He's going off the boards as the RB75 in fantasy. They brought back Samaje Perine. He's not being drafted. He's the 103 RB103. And they also drafted Taj Brooks. He's the RB69, actually going off before Zach Moss and Samaje Perine. Yeah, everybody loves the rookies.
Round rookie just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, especially and I'm going to bring this up when I talk about Chase Brown, Samaje Perine kind of has a little bit of a history here, and that could affect more than just Taj Brooks. Wide receiver one, the wide receiver one on the team, the wide receiver one in fantasy football, the wide receiver one in your hearts. Jamar Chase, he's a threat to score a touchdown every time he touches the ball. T. Higgins finally got a contract. We don't have to talk about that drama anymore. He's going off the board as the wide receiver 13. They still have my favorite wide receiver, Andre Yoshivas, as the wide receiver 3 on the team. He's the wide receiver 82 right now. I'm not talking about him, but he is one of my favorite late best ball picks. Jermaine Burton, a guy they drafted last year who did not do a whole lot. He's coming off the boards as the wide receiver 100. And Mike Gesicki re-signed a 3-year deal. I think that was a little bit of a surprise. He's coming off the board as the tight end 23. And we've talked about this. Gesicki's value kind of lies when there is no T. Higgins. Overall, Josh, and obviously you and I are going to talk about Chase Brown and T. Higgins in this episode, but overall, what can you say about this Bengals offense that hasn't been said certainly throughout the 2024 season?
They're going to throw a ton and barely run. So I think it's 6 or 7 years now that Zach Taylor's been the head coach and basically the offensive coordinator of this team. Only once have they called over 40% of the plays as running plays. Just once. Wow. So that tells you they don't care about running the football. They're going to throw it, and luckily for them, they have Joe Burrow's golden right arm to do it. When Joe Burrow is healthy and slinging it, you're pretty much a lock for 4,400 yards and 34 touchdowns. You might get more than that, which clearly he did last year, which is why for a barely over 500 team, he was in the MVP conversation. But their running back is typically going to handle over 60% of the rush share. That's why we like Bengals running backs.
Yeah.
Because not splitting carries. So that's why Chase Brown has a ton of value. This is why Joe Burrow has a ton of value. We know why Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have a ton of value. The question is, how much are they going to involve the tight end? Now, I do think that because they went out and signed Gesicki, it almost makes me think that maybe they won't throw to Chase Brown as much. That they might just use him strictly as the running back and just let him move the chains and kind of do his thing there, even though he is very valuable as a pass catching option. But we know T. Higgins' history with hamstring injuries. So Mike Gesicki is going to have a lot of very streamable weeks. So make sure you're paying attention to clubfantasyffl.com and reading Ryan's Stream of the Week article throughout the season, because I'm fairly certain Mike Gesicki will have some mentions quite a few.
The second T. Higgins has a questionable tag, Mike Gesicki moves up the list.
Yep. Pretty much. He'll be the number one option every week. But yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that's this offense. Like ever since Jamar Chase came in and took over, like he's 28% target share plus every single year. T. Higgins, usually over 17%. He might get up to that 20 if he's lucky, but it's usually between 17 and 19%. And everything else just kind of falls how it falls.
Yeah, I'm with you in that it is a largely predictable offense for me and Josh, who have been projecting for 5 years now. We always look at coaching trends, and these guys are very easily predicted. Over 600 passing attempts, under 400 rushing attempts. It's a lock. I remember, Josh, it was 2 or 3 years ago, and this hasn't changed much 3 years ago, where I was just shocked that this high-powered offense typically is near the bottom of the league in total plays run. They do not like force plays in Zach Taylor's offense. They go out there, they do their game plan. It is what it is. There's enough plays for everyone to go around. And that's kind of my main takeaway of the Bengals offense is for best ball. This is the offense to peg, because anybody can have a blow up week on any given week. The reason I like Andre Yoshivas, in the final 5 games of his rookie year, he scored 5 touchdowns. He's just one of those guys that can just pop off. And so you're looking 3 wide receivers deep with Chase, Higgins, and Yoshivas. Chase Brown is obviously very interesting. Mike Gesicki is very interesting. And all of that makes Joe Burrow interesting. But when I look at redraft, I'm obviously willing to pay the draft capital to get Jamar Chase. I'm probably willing to pay the draft capital to get Chase Brown, but everybody else, Josh, in redraft, like Joe Burrow, goes a little bit earlier than I'm comfortable with paying quarterbacks. I'm not drafting any of their backup running backs. As much as I love them, I'm not drafting Yoshi in redraft. I'm not drafting Mike Gesicki in redraft. So it's just so funny that in best ball, I want so many pieces of this offense, and redraft, I don't know that I'm willing to pay the cost. And to get Jamar Chase, I got to have a top 3 pick anyway. So
yeah, and I think honestly, I think Burrow's ADP is probably one of the more interesting ones, because again, when you're taking him at QB5, you're essentially expecting him to do exactly what he did last year.
Precisely. Which,
and
based on what me and Josh just said, he's probably going to.
Well, and that's the thing. He could, sure. But I mean, if you start seeing a dip, like if he doesn't hit 40 touchdowns again, he goes back down to 34, 35.
He's QB10. And you overpaid.
QB8, QB9, QB10, right? We'll eventually get to Patrick Mahomes when we do the Chiefs episode. But that's a guy that could very easily take a jump, right? Like we've seen Patrick Mahomes' history. Patrick Mahomes could easily be the QB5 this year. Well, so when I talk about T. Higgins, and this comparison will make a lot more sense, it's almost like why draft Burrow at QB5 when you can get Patrick Mahomes at QB10?
I mean, Josh, let's get into it with Higgins. Let's go ahead and start there because Higgins has always had warts, plain and simple. Whether it was he doesn't play enough games warts, whether it's he's holding out in minicamp warts. The one that obviously pisses me off the most is Higgins is one of the few guys that will suit up injured, play 3 plays, and then completely burn you. And shit like that has taken him off of my radar. How do you feel about him heading into the 20?
Yeah, I mean, you're basically, when you're paying wide receiver 13 prices for T. Higgins, you're assuming that he's going to have over 1,000 yards, that he's going to have 10 plus touchdowns, and he's going to play probably 16 games, 15 or 16 games, right? He's never played 17 games in a season, ever.
Yeah.
The only 2 seasons he's played a, quote, full season, his rookie year, and then in 2022, when the Bengals only played 16 games because of the whole thing with Buffalo and DeMar Hamlin.
Yeah.
So, but again, he left how many games early that year in 2022? He left a couple of games early because of the hamstring, coming in only playing 3 plays, 4 plays, whatever it was. But when I look at T. Higgins, it's all based on quarterback production because high value wide receiver 2s don't finish in the top 15 unless you have an all-star number elite performance from your quarterback, which, as I mentioned with Burrow, 3 times in his career, he's had over 4,400 yards and 34 or more passing touchdowns. Since the year 2000, there have only been 2 quarterbacks that have ever followed up a 40-plus passing touchdown season with another 40-plus touchdown season. Drew Brees and Tom Brady. That's it. Those are the only 2. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Burrow isn't in that same category because he is that damn good as a passer. Absolutely. It is very much in the realm of possibilities. But when you look at the 2 years prior to this big blow up that Joe Burrow had, over 4,400 passing yards, 34, 35 touchdowns, what did T. Higgins finish in those 2 seasons? Overall, wide receiver 24, wide receiver 19.
Yep.
Points per game finish, wide receiver 13, wide receiver 20. You are literally drafting him at his ceiling.
Yeah.
When I mentioned that he's likely going to need 1,000 yards and 10 plus touchdowns, he's never had those in the same season. Every year he's had 1,000 yards. He hasn't had more than 7 touchdowns. Every year he's had 10 plus touchdowns. He didn't even top 900 yards. So this is where you're drafting him. You are literally drafting him at his ceiling. If anybody that's watching this has watched our Dallas Cowboys episode, and I said, George Pickens is a screaming value where he's going at wide receiver 29 because his career averages where you put him, it's wide receiver 29 basically. You tack on the touchdowns that we hope should follow because he has Dak Prescott throwing him the football. He ends up at the top 15, which is where T. Higgins is being drafted. If you take the touchdowns away from Higgins, he's wide receiver 29. You take the yards away from the touchdowns, he's wide receiver 20. Don't draft T. Higgins at wide receiver 13. Draft George Pickens at wide receiver 29 because this is George Pickens' ceiling right here.
Yeah, that's going to lend itself perfectly into a would you rather, but it reminds me a lot, Josh, of what we just talked about when we recorded the Arizona episode. I said, there's not a lot of room for Brock Bowers to grow. There's a lot of room for Trey McBride to grow. So take Trey McBride, maybe not take Brock Bowers.
And that's the thing. It's like T. Higgins really isn't getting better than this.
And so, Josh, looking at it, Higgins is going off the board as the wide receiver 31. Obviously, you and I are both 13. Rather down on Higgins. Overall 31 wide receiver, 14 on Fantasy Pros, but regardless. You and I are not high, so I'm not going to talk about any of the guys going ahead of him, but there are some interesting names afterward, Josh, and I just want to run some of these names by you. I'm going to give you 2 names that I don't know if you love more than Higgins, and then I'm going to give you 2 names that I think you're going to be rather shocked are going after T. Higgins. So let's start with Garrett Wilson, Josh. You and I have talked a little bit about Wilson. Obviously, people aren't sure what to make of this Jets passing offense, but Garrett Wilson and T. Higgins are actually going back-to-back, pick 31 and pick 32.
I would take Wilson. Easily.
Really?
Wilson's my wide receiver 18. He's vastly above T. Higgins.
I think the other thing about all this, Josh, is all of these guys are the wide receiver ones on their respective team, except for Higgins.
And that's the other side of it. That's the other side of it.
So the other name I wanted to bring up to you is going 8 picks later, but he is technically his team's wide receiver 2. At wide receiver 18, we have Davante Adams, now with the Los Angeles Rams, Josh.
I would take Adams.
And I think I would too.
Because I trust Adams. I know his history. And that's really what it boils down to. I think with Adams, people are just scared because he's I think he's going to be 32 this season, right? Yes, we know Matthew Stafford and some of his injury concerns over the years, but I mean, Adams was just catching passes from a 40-year-old quarterback.
Yeah. And
averaged 10 targets a game with that quarterback, outpacing the younger Garrett Wilson.
So who's to say he can't outpace the younger?
And this is really the point of the equation here, right? There is a world where Davante Adams out-targets Puka Nacua.
Absolutely.
There is quite literally zero world where T. Higgins outpaces Jamar Chase.
I won't say zero world because I felt like he did it even for a few games last year, but it does seem unlikely. So,
yeah. But I'm talking like over a course of a full season, like a couple games here and there. Sure. Like a team could triple team Jamar Chase and Burrow's not going to be like, I'm going to throw it in triple coverage when I've got T. Higgins wide open one-on-one. Like, just it's a smart quarterback play.
And then this one shocked me a little bit, Josh. And honestly, if I'm on the board, I don't know which one of these guys I would take, but I really just want to get your reaction. 13 picks later, Rashee Rice.
Oh, I'm Rashee Rice.
He's going off as the wide receiver 20 right now. I'll be honest, you and I had this fight on last night's episode, and I don't know how much I trust him, but you're right. All the reports on Rice have been positive. And then Josh, this is the one I really wanted you to talk about. The wide receiver 23 going off 22 picks later, almost 2 full rounds. DK Metcalf, the wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh.
DK stats out as my wide receiver 13.
I thought you were high on him.
Yeah, I'm fine taking DK. And really, it's not even like. Look, I'm not gonna lie. I trust the Bengals passing offense a hell of a lot more than I trust the Steelers passing offense.
Yeah,
right. In a vacuum, I'm perfectly acceptable and fine saying that T. Higgins is a better wide receiver than DK Metcalf. But if you're telling me that DK Metcalf with a 28% target share over not even a 20% for T. Higgins, I'm going to take the 28% target share. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I agree with you on everybody but Rice, and I'm not even saying I don't agree with you on Rice. I just don't know where I stand on Rashee Rice. He is a guy who I clearly need to dig in more because I don't know what to make of his injury and everything that's going on there. But like to see Higgins going ahead of all these wide receiver ones, I do think the fantasy community may be a little bit too bought into this Bengals offense and to T. Higgins just being the best wide receiver 2 in the league. And I'm not saying he's not
Which
that.
He could very well be. I mean, there are some really talented wide receiver 2s. I mean, Devonta Smith is up there. Jordan Addison's up there.
Jalen Waddle when he plays.
Jalen Waddle. Like, these are all Devontae Adams, right? Like, these are all really good, really talented wide receiver 2s. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how talented a wide receiver 2 is. What matters is what opportunity are they going to have? And so many of these other wide receiver 2s, their wide receiver 1 probably isn't seeing a 28% target share.
Their wide receiver 1 isn't the best wide receiver 1 in the league. The best comp right now, arguably, Josh, for T. Higgins is Jordan Addison because he's in that situation. So.
Exactly. But again, like the Vikings with JJ McCarthy aren't going to throw over 600
nearly
times.
What the Bengals do.
So that's why nobody's valuing Jordan Addison that way. But they also have TJ Hawkinson, who's proven to be a target hog when he's healthy, right? Gesicki's not ever going to be that. Like, we know T. Higgins is the second target on this team, but he's never had more than 110 targets.
But I think it also lends itself to your first comparison, just to kind of wrap this thing up. George Pickens is in the exact same situation, but you can get George Pickens. I navigated away from the screen, Josh, but he wasn't even top 30 anymore when I most recently looked. George Pickens is now the wide receiver 33 going off 41 picks after T. Higgins.
See, I would much rather just wait and take George Pickens. I mean, they're literally back to back in my rankings. Like, I have Higgins 31 and Pickens 32. So like, they're right there. But again, when I see the consensus taking Higgins all the way up here, I'm going to fade Higgins and I'm just going to wait and take Pickens. Even if I have to take him around early, it's still valuable to me.
There you go, guys. And I think we can wrap up the T. Higgins talks on that, move over to the running game, Josh. So I caught, I think it was Hutch, and I don't remember whose show he was doing, but I caught somebody's show recently, and they were talking about they don't understand the hate that Chase Brown is getting after his year last year. And I wouldn't say that I'm giving him any hate whatsoever. He comes in as my RB12. He was the RB10 last year. We were very adamant after his rookie season that Chase Brown is a threat to score seemingly every time he touches the ball. And that kind of held true last year. 7 rushing touchdowns, even though he didn't hit 1,000 yards. 4 receiving touchdowns, I believe, makes him tied for second among all running backs in receiving touchdowns. So, Josh, it holds that he is a threat to score every time he touches the ball. But you briefly touched on what I wanted to touch on, and that is 65 targets last year. And I don't know that we can just pencil that in to happen again this year. And the reason I bring that up is, as you brought up, they re-signed Mike Gesicki. They re-signed Mike Gesicki to a decent deal. And a few years ago, Kyle Borgnoni for the Fantasy Footballers talked about how RB targets and tight end targets are more intertwined than you think they are. You can kind of look at them as one pool, and very rarely does an offensive coordinator go outside of his pool. So if a tight end's going to see more targets, it's likely going to come at the expense of a running back. And then you throw in a name that nobody wants to talk about. And Josh, while I was researching this, I got a surprise of my life. Off the top of your head, what are Samaje Perine's measurables?
Oh, he's a thickum. He's like 5'11", 235 or something like that.
Good job, Josh. 5'11", 240. I knew he was big. The ballers used to call him the pain bot. I knew he was big. But for him to be predominantly a receiving back being that big, he's obviously a hell of a pass blocker, which is why he's out there when he does this. And he's just, as you pointed out, thickum. But Josh, when I went back and looked at Samaje Perine's record in the Bengals offense, his last season in the Bengals was 2022, 51 targets and 4 receiving touchdowns. Now, I don't want to mislead anybody here. Joe Mixon had 75 targets that season. So I'm not saying that Samaje Perine's going to come in and take all of Chase Brown's targets away. But the RB2 in this offense last year was surprisingly still Zach Moss, even though he missed half the season, which tells you everything you need to know about Khalil Herbert. Zach Moss in half the season had 27 targets, Josh, and then Khalil Herbert only added 11. And so you wonder, are Chase Brown's receiving numbers inflated because they didn't have a second receiving back, and now they very certainly do. And so all I'm trying to say is there's a narrative that Chase Brown is being disrespected. I don't see it in his draft capital, and being perfectly honest, I think he's just as likely to go down as he is to go up this season.
Yeah, I think, so obviously everybody wanted Chase Brown to be the guy last year, right? Obviously it didn't start that way. They brought in Zach Moss, starts the season, ends up getting hurt, leaves the way for Chase Brown. There were a lot of things that Chase Brown didn't do well last year, but it became a volume thing. And obviously with the 63 targets and the passing work, it all added up. I think it was from week 6 on last year, he was the RB6 in fantasy football. And it's all volume based because that is the Bengals offense when it comes to running backs. It's all volume. We've seen it year in and year out with Joe Mixon in the past. So this was basically, get rid of Mixon, drop Chase Brown right in the bucket. And they didn't skip a beat, right? So they're not going to be overly efficient. They're just going to grind out 3 yards, 4 yards here and there. They're going to catch some passes. And hopefully they're going to score 10 plus touchdowns over total touchdowns. But when you bring in someone like Perine, that is a threat to Chase Brown, not because Perine is talented. It's because he's a veteran that understands pass blocking schemes.
And his role
that was a big worry with Chase Brown last year. That's why Zach Moss started. That's why Zach Moss played those third downs, because he understands pass protections. Chase Brown is a young running back. He's still learning these things. Zach Moss is perpetually hurt and, quite frankly, not very good at football. Perine knows this system.
I was shocked that Zach Moss is back. I had penciled him in as
they signed him in
over
for 2 years, I think.
I know, but I had penciled him in for career over after a neck injury at his age. I just don't know why he's even forcing it at this point.
I mean, honestly, it would not surprise me one bit if he's not on the final 53-man roster.
Yeah.
Like if Taj Brooks actually shows up, like when we did our Stars of Tomorrow running back preview show with John Lobb, like he was all over Taj Brooks. Like he loved this kid out of Texas Tech, I believe it was. Like could be the discount Ashton Genty, right? But again, 6th round draft capital. So there's not going to be a ton that's going to say, I need to peg Taj Brooks to cut into Chase Brown's carries. But a veteran like Samaje Perine could be that sort of like Jerick McKinnon thorn in the side kind of thing. And maybe we're overlooking Chase Brown, or we're over preparing for some sort of like, fantasy, boon because he was the RB6 after week 6 last year. But I like the way he stats out for me. I still have him at 63 targets. I only gave Perine like 15. Maybe that could change when I do my scrub through as we get through these, but he stats out as my RB11, which is right where he's being drafted. So like, I'm not really too high. I'm not really too low. I'm pretty well in consensus when it comes to Chase Brown.
So he's my 13 and I have him at 51 targets. And this is what stuck out to me, Josh. As we know, Zach Moss played 8 games last year. These are Chase Brown's targets in the first 8 games: 3, 0, 3, 3, 3, 3, 2, 4. First 8 games. 4 happens to be the game where Zach Moss got hurt. Then no Zach Moss. 5, 11, 7, 3, 8, 3, 3, 4. If you're telling me this guy's only going to see 3 targets a game, that's 48 to 51 targets. And I'm not saying this to bust your balls on your target numbers, because I originally statted him out that high, but I've had to keep dropping him. And I think they're going to lean on if Zach Moss plays, he's going to get 10 targets, but I do have Samaje Perine at like 33 targets this season. So
yeah, I mean, the way that my target shares broke down, like I still have Gesicki at 71, which I think is pretty in line with Cincinnati tight ends. Brown at 63. I gave T. Higgins 108, which is pretty well in line with what he does every single year. And I gave Chase Brown 163. So, like, those are the top 4 guys in the target tree. And that's pretty even across the board.
How many passes do you have them throwing, Josh?
I have Burrow at 631.
Okay, so I have 20 more targets than you. The reason I ask is I have everybody with way more targets than you. And I imagine Yoshi, I have way more than you. I have Gesicki at 88. Chase at 171, Higgins at 122. Obviously, I have Chase Brown high or lower, but I have Samaje Perine. How many targets do you have Andre Yoshibasa as? I know this is a biased thing on my part.
56.
I have him at 77. So me and you are pretty wildly different, even though I only have 20 more targets than you. So
yeah, I mean, I don't really see a point in over targeting T. Higgins. Like, I'm not going to give him 120 targets. He's never hit that number, ever.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Like, why am I going to give him that? Like, show me you can hit that before I give you that number. That's kind of the way that I look at it. So
I love it. All right, guys, those are our thoughts on Chase Brown and T. Higgins. As I mentioned, there will be a Bengals article on our website as you are watching this episode. We are not quite sure of the player, but it's written by Austin Amendolia, so I can guarantee you it's going to be a great article. Josh, I think you we touched a lot on this because of the player I picked. The training camp battle to watch is going to be a returning Zach Moss, a returning Samaje Perine, both returning from something different, and then the newly added Taj Brooks. If you were going to handcuff Chase Brown, if you were forced to handcuff Brown, which one of these players are you adding on your fantasy team?
Oh, it's Perine. It's not close. Yeah, I'm actually, like, the more that I think about it, I'm probably going to like redo my projections with Perine as the RB2, because I'm and again, a lot of this is really just going to depend on where Taj Brooks fits.
Yeah.
In, how he performs during training camp and preseason games and all these things. But I think if there's any of these running backs that's on the chopping block, it's Zach Moss, because injuries, ineffectiveness. We know the Bengals offensive line fucking blows. So you need people that can, like, just bowling ball their way through, and a 240-pound Samaje Perine has that in the bag. So
yeah, you hit on something very well. John Lobb loved Taj Brooks. There's a very good chance that if Chase Brown were to go down, and we don't like to play the injury game, but if Chase Brown were to go down, Taj Brooks might see a lot of run. But going back to what I was saying before, Samaje Perine's going to see all the passing work in that situation, which then makes him incredibly interesting in fantasy football in this offense. If Chase Brown were to go down, I think the world is going to put their fab on Taj Brooks. Me and Josh's fab is going to be on Samaje Perine.
Yeah, actually, mine will probably be on Mike Gesicki.
Well, that's a good point. As soon as someone gets hurt, Mike Gesicki becomes infinitely more valuable, and they might even run him. I feel like he ran the ball a few times last year. So, all right, as we wrap this thing up, we're going to look at the best bets. A reminder: if you're looking to place any of these wagers, please do so responsibly. But you can also do it over on Underdog. If you have not signed up yet, use promo code WOFF, and they will go ahead and hook you up with a deposit match and actually a free pick in their pick'em game. And they do season-long pick'em. We're going to talk about a few season-long options here. And if you haven't hit like and subscribe, what the hell is wrong with you? It's absolutely free. Drop a comment, do all the things that makes the algorithm love Club Fantasy just a little bit more so we can get more eyes on this great content we're putting out there. Josh, talk to me about Jamar Chase and an over-under you like.
Yeah, so this one's pretty easy for me. It's not great money. It's minus 110, but over 10.5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
When you look at his history scoring touchdowns, just through 4 seasons in the NFL, he scored 46 touchdowns. That is on average 11.5 per season. So that already clears. Already clears this number. But when you look at the elite passing seasons for Joe Burrow, when he's over 4,400 yards, 34 touchdowns, etc., again, he averaged it. Like he scored, oh crap, I just had it written down. It was 13, 9, and 17 in those 3 seasons. Like just astronomical numbers when you look at it. So again, if Burrow's on,
Chase is on.
He's scoring 10 touchdowns. He's scoring 11 touchdowns with ease. And that's why I've always had Chase over Jefferson. For everything that Jefferson does well, Chase does the same thing. One of them knows to find the end zone. The other one doesn't. And the one that finds the end zone is Jamar Chase.
And Chase is so liable to pop for 2 and 3 touchdown games that it may only take him 5 games to hit this number. And that's the part you really like about him.
100%. Just wait till he plays Baltimore.
Yeah, we know that's flat out ownership. I'm going along with that, Josh. I found 2 that I liked. One of them came with a little bit of history. I'll start with plus 550 for Joe Burrow to lead the league in passing. Joe Burrow led the league in passing by almost 300 yards. That's a full game, folks. Joe Burrow led the league in passing last year, and that's with the top 6 guys all playing all 17 games. So there's no game advantages here. Jared Goff was second at 46.29. Baker Mayfield was 418 yards behind Joe Burrow in third. So you're going to let me 5x my money to bet on something that literally just happened and there's no better passer in the league. But Josh, I thought I was going to go with plus 5,000 for Joe Burrow to win Offensive Player of the Year. And this is where it gets wild, Josh, because this didn't make sense to me till I went and looked it up, and it'll probably make sense to you right away. Joe Burrow is only plus 500 to win the MVP, but he is plus 5,000 to win Offensive Player of the Year. And
I know exactly what that tells you.
Go for it.
It tells you that the defense is so bad, they're not going to win enough to win the division.
Oh. Which
isn't going to put him in a position to have a 12, 13, 14 win season that all of the MVPs end up having.
No. You're hearing it backwards. He is plus 500 to win the MVP. They think he has a good chance. They think he has no chance to win Offensive Player of the Year. And they don't give it to
because the Offensive Player of the Year award is not a quarterback award.
Exactly.
That's for everybody else because the quarterbacks win the MVP.
The last quarterback to win Offensive Player of the Year was Patrick Mahomes in 2018. So it has been 7 years since a quarterback. So it was interesting money, but I'm like, you're kind of burning your money at that point. So
yeah,
they seem to, and we've all kind of joked about this. The MVP is a quarterback award. And then the Offensive Player of the Year, that was probably the real MVP.
What was the I'm trying to think, because I know Saquon won Offensive Player of the Year last year, but because Joe Burrow obviously didn't win the MVP, I think there were a lot of people that were putting him in the conversation for Offensive Player of the Year. Where do you you remember where he finished in the Offensive Player of the Year rankings?
Shouldn't take me long to find it. We'll just put it in 2024 Offensive Player of the Year voting. See if we can get that to pop up here real quick on the episode. AP NFL Offensive Player of the Year voting. That would be Saquon Barkley at 1, Lamar Jackson at 2, Jamar Chase, Derrick Henry. Joe Burrow was 5th, and he was not close.
Well, I mean, yeah, I that does make sense. I mean, you look at the year that Lamar had, and a lot of people thought he would have won the MVP as well. So.
Burrow did get 1 first-place vote, which is more than Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase got 0 first-place votes.
See, that's wild to me. The man won the receiving Triple Crown last year, and they basically said, it's whatever.
Going back, Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Derrick Henry, Michael fucking Thomas, and then, as I mentioned, Patrick Mahomes, Todd Gurley in 2017, and then it was still a quarterback award. Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, DeMarco Murray, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees.
And they all won the MVP that season, Ryan and Cam Newton.
Yeah, so it used to be they were fine with giving it to quarterbacks. That does not appear to be the case anymore. So as I mentioned, I would rather put my money on the plus 550 for him to lead the league in passing. The plus 5,000 for Offensive Player of the Year feels like a sucker bet, and it is just the wrong way. Don't burn your money there, guys. That is going to wrap up our look inside of the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I said, we just crossed halfway. We still have 15 teams left. Coming up next, the Seattle Seahawks. So moderately less exciting, though there are some very interesting fantasy football prospects on the Seattle Seahawks. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you hit like, subscribe. We'll be back with more of these episodes. We're dropping 3 every week, but we are still going live every single Wednesday with no pun intended, every single Thursday with Mock Girl Summer, every single Friday with Mock It Like It's Hot. Club Fantasy is giving you all the content you can handle this summer. We are here to help you win your leagues. I hope you can hit that subscribe button for us. Always remember, defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football. We will see you next week with the Seattle Seahawks.